Alright, Daf Yud Gimel. This is Shabbos' Daf. We're still in the middle of the discussion about Shtika La'achar Matan Mois, that Rava had said that Kol Shtikusa La'achar Matan Mois, if she's quiet only after the Nesinas HaMois for Kiddushin was done, it does not count. It's not a raya that she's being Makabel Kiddushin. 7 lines from the bottom, Omar Rava Mino Amina La. How do I know this? Tanya, we learned in a Braisa, Omar La, Kinsi Selazuba Pikodin. The guy tells the Isha to take this money as a pikadon, to hold on to it. V'chazer v'amarla, and then he says to her, Hiskad shili bayit, to be mekudeshes with this seller. So, bishas matan mois, if he says this before she took the money, meaning at the time of the nesinas hamois, then mekudeshes, because her taking it now is a gilui that she's being makabel l'shem kedushin. However, liachar matan mois zokta brisa, if it only happened after the money was given to her, so then it'll depend. Rotzasa mekudeshes, le rotzasa mekudeshes. It'll be totally whether or not she was nisratzah. So what does that mean? My rotzasa, my loy rotzasa. Ilema rotzasa Amr in that she said yes, so that means Michlal the ratio, according to the ratio that she was Mikudeshes, moving over to Amr Aleph now, Ki Amr Loi Nami Havi Kiddushin. Even when she says I'm not Makabel it for Kiddushin, it also should be a good Kiddushin. But how's that Shaykh? Amr Loi. She's saying I don't want to get married, and you're telling me yet she'll still be married? That doesn't make any sense. Elalav Rotzasa da Amr in. Loi Rotzasa, it's not that she said no, but rather the Ishtika Mishaska. She's just quiet. She doesn't respond at all. Ushma Mina Shtika Lachar Matan Mois Lav Klumhi. So Vice dies that when there's a shtika after the matan mois, it doesn't mean a kabbalah's kedushin, and that will be Rava's makar from this brisa. Now, just in general, what is the svara why shtika lachar matan mois is a problem? We have 2 svaras in the Achrayim. The Shari Yosher, Reb Shimon Shkop in Zayin Yud Beis, says that it's a chesaron in the maisa kedushin. If a person doesn't have the kavana for this maisa to work, that's not considered proper kavana for a maisa kedushin. You have to reconcile this with Reb Shimon that we spoke out back on Daf Vav about the Asukim Ba'isa Inyan, where Reb Shimon brought out from Tosfos that a person could accidentally get married, Vaistais, as long as there's ruts in there, even though this particular Maisa is not have the Kavanah for Kiddushin, it would still work. So I'm not quite sure how to reconcile these 2 different ideas from Reb Shimon. I'll go upon him. One idea is that it's a problem in the Maisa Kiddushin for Kavanah for the Maisa Kiddushin rather, and the Pnei Yeshua says there's a different problem. If there's a Shtikus Lachar Matan Mois, it's a Chesarn in the Eidos, because the Edom don't see that she's taking it L'Shem Kiddushin. So you don't have any Edom on that. Back to the Gemara. Kashu bo b'fum Nahara Mishmeid Rav Huna Bereder Rav Yehoshua. They asked the following kasha. Me dummy. Is the Shtika in the case of the Brisa compared to the case that Rava was talking about? If you remember, the Gemara's case was the story of the guy who was Mekadesh be Tzifsa Da'asa, was this mat of Hadassim. But there's a big difference between the Brisa's case and this case of the guy who gave the mat, because Hassam, Teres Pikadain, Yahavinu Nihala. In the case of the Brisa, Lechatchila, he did give it to her as a Pikadain. So later on, when he changes his mind and makes it for Kiddushin, it's understandable that she keeps on holding it even though she doesn't want to marry the guy, because there's a reason she's holding it else Pikadin. And Savra, and she thinks, Ishadina la umitabre, let's say if I drop all these coins and they break before he picks them up, Mechayv Nabahu, I'm going to be achrei for them. I'm a shomer. I'll be achrei for these things. I'll have to pay for them. So therefore, I will hold on to them. B'teres pikadon. But hacha b'teres kedushin yahavim yalla. By the case of the mat, the guy gave it to the isha l'shem kedushin, not for pikadon. So if she doesn't really want to marry the guy, why is she holding on to stuff? Lishdinhu, she should just drop it. She's not achrei for any kind of hezek. She's not a shomer on this mat. Parach Ravachai argued and said, no, atukula nashi dina gemiri. Can you just assume that the nashim are so bakant in these halachas that since she wasn't makabel b'ter shmira, therefore she wouldn't be responsible? Hachinami saver, she's also going to think ishadina leum mitabri mischayavna ba'achriyosaihu. So even if it was given to me l'shem kedushin, but I don't want to marry the guy, I'm still going to be achrei for it. That's what she'll mistakenly think, and therefore it is a good tzushtel to the brisa to our case of Rava. There's a very interesting side discussion over here about this bal pikada, and let's say if a person is given something for shmira, the Rajba over here asks, why can't the woman, even if she is given this thing b'teres pikadon, why can't she just say harish l'chalafanecha and just, why is a shomer any worse than a pile? The Rajba asks. Why can't you just give it back? So let any shomer just give something back in the middle. The Ketzais in Siman Ayin Daled argues with this hanach of the Rajba and says, and it's not true. A shomer is chayiv l'shalem. He can't just do the harish l'chalafanecha thing and be chayizer in the middle. A pile can. A pile, look, don't pay me for today, I'll stop working for you. But a shomer, no, you took on this achrayas to be shomer. You can't just give it back in the middle. You have to actually carry out the shmira, and you would be financially achrei for this thing. Sholcha Rav Acha barav l'kamei de Ravina. Kihai gavna mai. What's the halacha legabe this case about giving the mat? Is she mikudeshes or not? So Sholach le Ravina says back, Anan leishmiya lan hod Rav Huna bered Rabbi Yeshua. We never heard this taina of Rav Huna bered Rabbi Yeshua, but atuna deshmiluchu. But you who heard it, chashulhu. Therefore you should be worried about it, and therefore you have to be chayshish for a get before she marries anybody else. Hahi itza tahavikom mizavna varsheche. There was a woman who was selling these ribbons. Also who gavra chotav varshecha mina. A guy came and grabbed one of these things from her. Amr lei, she said, Havani hali, give it back to me. Amr lo, he says to her, Yavinalech mikadishli, if I give it back, you're going to be mekudeshes. Shakalte v'ishtika. So she took it back, but she kept quiet. She never was maskim to the Kiddushin. The Omer of Nachman, Yechayla Lamemer, in Shakli v'didi Shakli. I took it back, but it was mine that I took back. I wasn't never maskim to a Kiddushin. Eisvei Raveler of Nachman, Kidsha begezel uvechomas uvegneva. A guy is mekadosh an isha with things that he got illegally. Eishachot sella miyadav kidsha, or he grabbed her sella and gave it right back to her. Mikudeshes. It does work, even though that's not really his property. So back on the case of the ribbons, it should also be a good Kiddushin. To which the Gemara answers, Hasam b'deshadich. It depends whether there was already a shidduch here, whether they had already previously agreed to get married. But by the case of the ribbons, there was no previous shidduchin, and therefore the Kiddushin doesn't count. Uminot temra deshanilon ben shadich udeloy shadich. Ditanya Amar Love, a guy says to a woman, Kinsi selazush ani chayev lechi, take this money that I owe you, v'chazer Amar Law, his kachli by, you should be mekudeshes to me with that money, b'shas matan mos rotzasa mekudeshes le rotzasa ina mekudeshes. However, la'achar matan mos afil rotzasa ina mekudeshes. And now we got to clarify, my rotzasa, my le rotzasa. Ilem rotzasa da Amar in, loy rotzasa da Amar loy. It's mashma then, ho ashtiko have a Kiddushin. It's mashma if she would stay quiet, it would be good Kiddushin. So then if that's the case, v'nisni mekudeshes tam, then why does the ratio of this brayse talk about whether she's maskim or not? Let the Tana just say that she's mekudeshes. Ki hosam, just like he does in the brayse before on Amad Beis, where the man's telling her to take the sella. Ella, as we said earlier, rotzasa damar in, however, loy rotzasa da shtika, that she just kept quiet. The katani de'ena mekudeshes. And the Tana is telling us that if she doesn't say anything, she's not mekudeshes, because my time yechal loymer in shakli v'didi shakli. So I velokosha hach the kidsha begezel v'chomas u'gneva. I, the kasha you asked me beforehand, where if he gives her kidsha begezel, it still is mekudeshes. Oy shachat of sella miyadav kidsha mekudeshes. What's the difference? Alalav shmamina hadeshadich v'adalei shadich. Must be the chilik is whether there was a shidduch there and they'd agreed to get married in advance. The whole idea of being mekadosh and isha begezel, so the Rashi Shita on later on Nun Beis is going to be that it works like a mechila. She's meichel the geneva to the man, so when he gives it to her, he's actually giving her something. The Achronim are very bothered by the Rashi. How can you be meichel something when it's be'en? You can be meichel a chayiv, but how can you be meichel an actual property while it's still be'en? And this is the place to talk about the kinyana geneva sugya, because what's happening is when someone steals something, it's possible, if you understand kinyana geneva that way, that really there is a true kinyan. Nora have a chiyav hashava, but once you have the mechila, that removes the chiyav hashava, leaving the ganaf to completely now own the geneva that he stole, umameli, he can be mekadosh nisha with it. Kinach nafshe de Rav Asi. When Rav Asi died, Ailu Rabbanan linkutinhu lishmaitze, the Rabbanan went to be malakit all of his teachings. They were writing a sefer, basically, of all his memories. So they were all saying over, they were all iberzuging what Rav Asi had said. So Amar lahu hahume Rabbanan, Rav Yaakov shmei. Rav Yaakov was his name. Hachi Amar Rabbi Asi. Amar Rabbi Mani kishem she'eni isha niknas bepachas mishava pruta, like Shitas Beis Hillel. So kach in karka niknas bepachas mishava pruta. Amar le, but the Rabbanan said it's not true. Tanya, we learned in a braysa afal pisha eni isha niknas bepachas mishava pruta. However, karka niknas bepachas mishava pruta. So Amar Rav Yaakov said no. Kitanya hiba chalipin. When the braysa was talking about that you can make it for pachas mishava pruta, that's talking about with a kinyan chalipin. And Tanya kainim bekli the afal pisha ein b'shava pruta. That was a memra of Rav Asi. Another memra. Hader Yasif v'kamri hada Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel kol she'eni yadei b'tiv gittin v'kiddushin le'yehei le'eseki mahen. We had this Gemara earlier with Machlekes Rashi and Taisus. Rashi had said it was about being masader gittin in kiddushin. Taisus said don't talk to women because you might accidentally get married with them. Amar Rabbi Asi Amar Rabbi Yochanan v'koshen la'olam yoser midar hamabel. These masader gittin v'kiddushin who don't really know enough halacha, they're worse than the people by the dar hamabel. Shene'amar aloy v'chachesh v'raitzeach v'gonoiv v'noiv parotzu v'domim v'domim noagu. My mashma, how do you see that these are worse than the people by the dar hamabel? Kidimitar game of Yosef. Moildin benin minishei chavrehain. They had children from their friends' wives. Chayvin al chayvin meisifan. So they were adding one chayv on top of another chayv by making more and more mamzerim. Uchesiv al kain teachal haaretz. Because of this, the world will be destroyed. Umlal kol yoshev ba, and all that, and everyone who lives there is going to be displaced. Chayas asoda ba'efa shamayim v'gam degei hayam yeyasefu. All of the fish in the sea will be destroyed as well. Bilu b'dar mabel lo nigzer gzeira al adagim shebayam. The fish were not affected by the mabel. Shenamar mikol asher v'charav mesu v'loi dagim shebayam. Iluhacha afilu dagim shebayam. Ben Yehoyada points out that dagim represent Talmidei Chachamim. Find another chazal. Frekting Gemara ve'ema ad avid l'chulhu. We're making it sound like just these mamzerim was the reason why all this churban would take place. But maybe it's until they do all of the averis that the Navi and Hosea enumerates, and not just the mamzeris. To which the Gemara says, Leisalka daitach tichsiv ki mepnei ola achla haaretz. So you see, it's because of any one of those averos that are mentioned by Hosea. Ve'ema ola l'chud v'hanach l'chudehoin. The olo is referring to swearing falsely. Maybe that's something that actually can cause a churban. But the other averos that are listed in Hosea, maybe you need to have all those together to deserve a complete destruction. So you don't have a raya that it's only the mamzeres that creates the punishment. Turning over, so the Gemara, miksiv uforatzu, paratzu ksiv, without a vav. So therefore, the next pasuk that says that the korban is going to be coming as a result of this, it's only talking about those mamzer, meaning the last thing that was mentioned and not the other averos. More from the members of Rav Asi. Hadar Yasvi v'Ka'amri, the Rabbanan were sitting to be mesader the teachings of Rav Asi Hadatanan. It says in the Mishnah in Masechta Kinim, Ha'isha shevi achatas omesa. We know Yeledes brings both a carbon oila and a carbon chatas. So the case is the Ha'isha shevi achatas omesa. The woman had the chance while she was still alive to bring the carbon chatas, but then she died. So the halach is Yaviu Yarshin Oilasa. Her Yarshin bring the carbon oila that she never had a chance to bring in her lifetime. Amr Yehuda Amr Shmuel, Husha Frishasa Mechayim. That's only if the woman already was mafresh that carbon oila while she was still alive. Avalei Frishasa Mechayim. But if she never was mafresh that carbon oila while she was still alive, the Yarshim are not achrei to now bring that carbon oila from their money. So Alma Vaistoi Shmuel holds Kasavar Shibuda Lav Dairaisa, because it's telling whether there was a specific hafrasha of a particular animal. However, Amr of Asi, Amr of Yechanan, who argues with Shmuel, Afal Gav Shaloye Frishim Mechayim, they will still be mechuyev to bring it. Alma Kasavar Shibuda Have Dairaisa. This is an important machlokes Shmuel and Rav Asi whether or not the shibud to bring the carbon is going to be deirais or drabanan. Nafkamina is whether or not you have to be mafresh the animal mechayim. Shmuel and Rav Asi and Rabbi Yechanan l'chaira are not saying anything new. The Rav Shmuel de Amrei Tarvahu milva al peh eina gaiva min yarshim v'lemin al kuchais milva bepeh, as opposed to a milva b'shtar that would be meshubed to the estate. But a milva al peh is not that way. Rav Yechanan and Reish Lakish Amrei Tarvahu milva al peh gaiva min yarshin beimin al kuchais. So you can see that the shibud by milva al peh is similar to the shibud of bringing the carbon, and this is already an existing machlekes. So why does Shmuel and Rabbi Yechanan have to argue about this again? So tzricha, both machlekuyos are necessary because this is where Shmuel says by the milva al peh mishum delay milva ksuva b'tayrahi. A milva al peh is not considered the classic milva that is in the Torah, avol bahach. But by the case of a yeledes, where the Torah makes you mechuyev to bring the carbon, maybe Shmuel would be masking for Rabbi Yechanan Reish Lakish that there would be a shibud on the estate. Maybe only by the case of the yeledes, that's where Rabbi Yechanan said his halacha that there's going to be a shibud. The milva ksuva b'Torah ksuva b'shtar damya. Avol bahach, by the case of the milva al peh, maybe they'd be masking to Shmuel that the estate is not going to be mechuyev tzricha. Therefore, you have to have a machlekes by both cases. Amar of Papa hilchas a milva al peh gaiva min a yarshin ve'ena gaiva min a lekuches gaiva min a yarshin because shibud de deiraisa ve'en gaiva min a lekuches the less lay kala. It's a practical matter. Even though it's midairaisa, there might be a shibud, but since there's no kol, the lekuches are going to be off the hook. So this was brought in only because we were listing the things that we learned from Rav Asi, so we mentioned this machlekes also. But now we get back to Masechta Kiddushin. V'kaina es atzmai beget uva misas habal. So we know the husband is mater his wife to get remarried because of a get. Bishleim a get tichsiv v'kosel sefer krisis. But ela misas habal minolan. How do we know that the misa of the husband is mater her to get remarried? It's kind of an amazing kasha. Do you really need a mucker for such a thing? L'chayr, there's no husband here. But we see very clearly from this whole Gemara that it absolutely does require a mucker. So l'chatchila the Gemara says svarahu hu asra v'hu sharsa. The husband first asered her to other men, and now he's being mat to her. In fact, the Gemara v'ha'arayis to aser lu v'le sharlu. The husband who marries this woman now asers his relatives to become married to her. That doesn't change. V'le sharlu. Just because he dies is not matter now his krivim to marry her. Taka. Elamid amar rachmana yavama she'ein labana masura. From the fact that the Torah said that a yavama who has no children can't marry another man. Ha yesh labana, but once she has children, she could marry. So vice versa, this yavama with children. Another way of saying that is an almana, a woman whose husband died, is mutaris, can get remarried. So vice versa, the Torah is telling you that an almana can get remarried. The dilma in labana masura, maybe when she has no children, then she's going to be asura la alma v'shari liyavim, she only mutar to the oven. V'yesh labana, but if this almana would have children, lukuli alma nami asura, maybe she's even asur to the rest of the world. Peladika havamina, we really think that maybe this woman is asur to everybody, even though her husband is dead. Elamida omer rachmana almana l'kain gadol asura, from the fact that the Torah has to asur an almana to a kain gadol, vice versa, halakoin hedyat sharia, a regular almana could marry a kain. It's not so pasha because dilma l'kain gadol b'lav u'lekuli alma ba'asei. Maybe we only go down the madrega from a lav to an iser asei. Rashi says the asei is v'yotza v'haisa li'ish acher dafka al yidei gerushin and not al yidei misa. That's a lava ba mechlal asei is an asei. So the Gemara says, it can't be that there's an iser asei because hay asei maya vidite. What would it be doing? Ida hanya misa sabal. If the husband helps be matter the isha from her iser, so tishtri lagamri, then it should be matter her in gansen. In idalea hanya misa sabal, and if you're telling me the misa of the husband doesn't really be matter her, so then tikma bil milsa kamaisa. Let her just stay in the original iser, just like as it was when her husband was still alive. Why is that not so mistabra? Afikta misa. The death of the husband took her away from an iser misa, but ukimta al asay, and only gave her an iser essay, which is obviously less chomer. And I'll show you a precedent for this because midi dehavi apsulia mukdashim. Dimikara ispuhu meila v'asir begiza v'avoda. Lechatchila, an animal that's hektish that you have not redeemed, you have isuri meila, and they're also for giza v'avoda parkinu. But once you are redeeming them, meila lespuhu begiza v'avoda asiri. So you still see that even though they're usher, but it's lesser of an iser. The Gemara is masking to this and says, okay, I'll give you a new mucker. That how do you know an almana can get remarried? Element de Omer Krav, from the fact that Torah says pen yamas b'milchama. If a guy dies in battle, the ish acher yikachena. Somebody else is going to take her as a wife. So you see, she can get remarried. Maskefler of Shishi Breder Avidi Emaman acher. You know who this acher is? Yavam. Maybe that only means the dead husband's brother, but not stama guy. Amar of Ashi Beis Chuvas Bedavar. Chada the yavam leikri acher. You don't call the yavam an acher, which is screaming about the lumdus of Yavamis that the Yavam is taking the place of the brother, but he's not just another guy. And also, Usanea ha'isho acharain, because of la sefer krisais, oiki yomas ha'isho acharain, v'iskish misa legerushin. By putting these two psukim next to each other, we're comparing the husband's death to gerushin. So ma gerushin sharia v'goymeres, af misa sharia v'goymeres. But lamaskon that's coming out, we do seem to have this pasuk of pen yamas b'molchama v'ish acher yikachena to say that the almana is allowed to get remarried. This is, of course, the whole sugya of Eishes Eliyahu and whether or not Misa is a matir or just simply because there's no husband present. It does seem to be that a Misa is a matir and therefore Eishes Eliyahu would still be a surah because there was no heter of the Misa. There's the famous Trumas Adeshen that really it's Eishes Re'ehu v'lei Eishes Malach, and that's the reason that Eishes Eliyahu would be different. Al Kapanim will stop here and pick it up in Mirz Hashem tomorrow.